If you don't have time to grind and you want to buy a stacked account in 2K with max badges, a nice record, and a high overall, hit my man SportsTNB up. His Twitter handle is on the screen, and you can find the link in both the comment section and in the description.
Greg Oden and the Portland Trail Blazers. Kenny has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
Well, for the Rip City fans, it certainly does. The last time they took a center with the #1 pick in the draft, it was Bill Walton. He brought them an NBA championship. They hope Oden will have a similar impact.
What will he give that team, which had some nice young players last year too, including the Rookie of the Year, Brandon Roy?
Well, right off the bat, he'll help them defensively. I think with him in the middle, they've got a chance to be one of the top defensive teams in the league. Nate McMillan has got to be licking his chops.
And this right here, this is the visual representation of about how well that went. Look at this. Hit him with the cross. Ooh! Oh my goodness. What Kenny Smith was talking about with Greg Oden, this is the visual. I hate to do this to you, Greg. Oh my god. Even in 2K8. Got guys touching the floor in 2K8. Oh my lord. All these unsuspecting bystanders, these are witnesses at a crime scene. You know, because of their pre-draft workouts, they were saying that Greg Oden was faster. He had more agility than Kevin Durant. Let's put that to the test. Got him on the wing here by myself. Couple of crossovers. Oh no, he can't keep up with me. Okay, that's decent defense. Can't keep up. Give him another spin. Yeah, alright. Cut. Greg doesn't deserve this. But did he actually deserve to go first overall in 2007? We all know the story by now. Portland Trail Blazers have Rookie of the Year Brandon Roy. They have a spot at the small forward that needs help, and they have a spot at the center that needs help. And the best two picks in the 2007 draft seem to be Greg Oden and Kevin Durant. So they go with Greg Oden, and literally by September of that year, by September of 2007, before his rookie year starts, he has to have microfracture surgery. Do you know how crucial that is? When guys have microfracture, you really assume that their career is never going to be the same. I believe T-Mac had that. Amari Stoudemire had it, but he didn't decline right away. Yeah, that's one of those things. If you hear your favorite player is having microfracture, it's probably over. Sooner or later, it's going to be over. Anyways, the reason that you're getting a random Kevin Durant and Greg Oden video is because on my first channel, I actually have this video planned. I'm in the process of writing it. If you've been keeping up over there, you know that the draft videos, people have been loving those, so I'm pushing them out. And probably next week, if the script comes out to what I want it to be, you're going to get the full story of why the Portland Trail Blazers selected Greg Oden over Kevin Durant and where he is right now. But in the process of writing and researching for that video, I learned a lot. Read some stories I didn't know, a lot of which I'm not going to tell yet because that's really for that video. However, I ran into an absolutely hilarious article in hindsight. Of course, hindsight is 2020, so I'm not about to just trash the dude who wrote it because, as a matter of fact, in 2007, it actually wasn't anything crazy he said. But 12 years later, now that we know how the careers go, now that we know Kevin Durant goes on to be a probably 3-time champion here in a couple of months, goes on to become one of the best scorers ever, this article from NBA.com is talking about, and this is in 2007, this is before the draft, this guy is arguing why the Portland Trail Blazers shouldn't even be looking at anybody else except Greg Oden. And he listed them all out in bullet points. So I wanted to come on a video and show you guys what he said back then, just because in 2019 it's really fun to look at things that were said about players back in the moment. Yeah man, the internet, it just doesn't forget. That's probably one of the most entertaining parts of writing videos for me, is I get to read these articles that were written at the time of the event that I'm talking about, so I get to see non-filtered what people thought. And here is what Maurice Brooks of NBA.com thought. I'm gonna link this article in the description, by the way, if you want to read it for yourself, because there's more here. So in terms of why he thought Greg Oden should absolutely have gone before Kevin Durant, he says that Greg Oden is a fan favorite. His smile and friendly demeanor off the court is reminiscent of another center who currently stars for the Miami Heat. Of course, that's in reference to Shaquille O'Neal, because this is shortly before he was traded to the Phoenix Suns. And back then, it wasn't crazy to think that Greg Oden, not that he was going to have the same impact as Shaquille O'Neal on the NBA, but that he was going to be a dominant big man leading his team to championships. Oh, they absolutely thought that. Many people thought that. Says that Greg Oden is an athletic freak. Scouts will be talking about his workouts for years to come. I'm not going to give the specifics on his workout right now, because that's more of a, that's something I go more in detail on the upcoming video on the main channel. But yes, Like I said, a lot of his workout numbers were better than Kevin Durant's, and I feel like this far down the road, people don't remember that Greg Oden wasn't an athletic freak. They kind of see him as just a really large big man, more of a traditional center, and they don't even know that he was really seen as having good agility, great footwork, great speed. Those are things that when you look at a picture of Greg Oden, you really don't think about. He says that Greg Oden is capable of playing forward on offense, so obviously power forward. The way he runs the floor and his soft shooting touch make him the anti-Shaq. Whoa! They were calling Greg Oden the anti-Shaq back in 2007. That's how much hype was around this guy. Wow. Anti-Shaq, have I? The only anti-Shaq I've ever heard of in my life is Hakeem Olajuwon. I've never heard those words, I've never seen those words put to paper about anybody else. Greg Oden was supposed to be, or at least people thought he could become, the anti-Shaq. Greg Oden is an underrated passer. He has shown that he has good court vision and is capable of making the right decisions with the ball. Greg Oden is the type of player who performs his best on the biggest stage. Ask Florida after he hung 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 blocks on them in the championship game. I actually want to talk about that because in Bill Simmons' book of basketball, he claims to be one of the people that always thought that Kevin Durant should have went first. And one of the points that he brings up is that Greg Oden only had one wow game, quote wow game in college. So this is the game he was referring to. You know, one of those games where a player just completely dominates it and takes it over. He says that Florida championship game was the only time Greg Oden had like a really eye-popping wow performance. I'm not gonna lie, like I know how true that is, but I do know that Greg Oden was dealing with a wrist injury during his freshman year, so that might be likely. Also, his numbers aren't really like fantastic. I think they were 16 points and 10 rebounds. Not bad, but that's not anything like crazy, right? So that might have really been his only wow game. Whereas he was putting that up against Kevin Durant, who apparently did more and had more wow games in college. So just wanted to point that out since Maurice put that here. Oh, this is a big one. It says that Greg Oden is a center, and history shows that centers win titles. Lots of them. For proof, see Tim Duncan. He plays the 5 in my book, that's what he says. Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Bill Russell. And while we're talking about Russell, Greg Oden is the next Bill Russell. He changes games defensively, finishes with either hand around the rim, rebounds well, and always appears to be in the right position. Before the 2007 draft, we have a claim here that Greg Oden was going to be the next Bill Russell, the modern day Bill Russell. That's what was thought of him. Greg Oden is 7 feet tall and 260 pounds, enough said. And of course, that was a big part with him and Kevin Durant because they were looking at KD, who couldn't really even bench 180 pounds. Then you have this Greg Oden guy who's tall, huge, athletic. So that was another factor in a lot of the research I did where people in 2007 were saying you obviously go with Greg Oden. Size had a lot to do with that. Greg Oden is capable of making the Blazers a playoff team right now. In 2007, they finished with 32 wins. So in the Western Conference, he would probably had to push them up to somewhere around 50. Greg Oden is a perfect fit for Portland, who hasn't had a superstar in the middle since Bill Walton was lacing him up. Sorry, Arvydas Sabonis and Rasheed Wallace. That's fair, none of those guys were like superstars with Portland. Arvydas came way past his time, and Rasheed Wallace, I wouldn't ever have called him a superstar. Greg Oden is going to get much better. Remember, he played most of last season with an injured right wrist and still connected on over 60% of his shots from the field. The injury forced him to rely on his left hand, which makes him an even more complete player. That's where you start to see some of the parts where it's like maybe they should have given Kevin Durant a little bit more consideration. Because, well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and say this. This take aged like wheat bread because talking about Greg getting much better, like I said, he had surgery before the season even started. He lost his rookie year. But then there was another telltale sign that he was going to have knee problems, which you're gonna see that in the actual video. Don't want to give the whole thing away right now. But the fact that he was already dealing with an injury through college, and it was a wrist injury, it wasn't a knee injury, so I can't really fault him for that. A wrist can heal, right? It is worth noting that he did not bench in the pre-draft workouts because of that wrist, so there's that. And this is a good spin on the wrist injury, saying that it forced him to play left, so that made him better. I guess that was a good way to spin it back then. Greg Oden is a franchise player right now. His turnaround jumper, jump hooks, and power moves around the basket are unguardable. It's very rare that a guy comes out of college and you immediately say this is a franchise player right now. Like, we can say franchise player in the future, right? I remember hearing that about D'Angelo Russell. They were saying that this kid is going to be a superstar in the league, but they weren't necessarily saying it was going to happen that year for the Lakers. And here we are in 2019, and now it's not, I don't think anybody's going to be that surprised if he ends up being a franchise player. He has definitely come into his own. But this is how highly Greg Oden was thought of. He was thought to be a franchise player at that moment, coming into his rookie year. That's how much hype was around this guy. Greg Oden is capable of knocking down 15-foot jumpers and commanding a double team, which will free up his teammates. If true, then he would have fit right in if his prime was actually allowed to blossom and he was still playing today. Although, of course, he probably would have had to extend his range even further. It says that Greg Oden is only 19, but appears much older both physically and mentally. You're looking at a guy who is a physical specimen in Greg versus a very skilled guy in Kevin. So the comparisons are very difficult, and that makes our job a little bit more difficult because we're comparing apples to apples, said Blazers general manager Kevin Pritchard. That part that he said about Greg being older physically, that wasn't necessarily a good thing. One of the things that Bill Simmons talks about in his book is that you could see Greg Oden, well, not see his age because he was only 19 like this says, but if you saw him, you would have thought he was 30 at 19 years old because of the way he walked, his gait. It wasn't very good. It's not a good thing for people to see how you walk and move and think you're 30 when you're 19. And Bill Simmons puts that as a red flag that there was probably going to be some problems down the road. Which, yeah, I mean, you can look at the way somebody walks in their gait and not use that as a 100% way to say they'll be good or healthy in a sport, but it can be some type of indicator though. Obviously it was here. And he finishes off by saying Greg Oden is the only player the Blazers should be considering to take with the most prized pick of the draft. So that's that. This guy summed up what a lot of people thought in the Greg Oden vs Kevin Durant comparison back in 2007 when the Blazers were choosing who to draft. You're going to get some different points in the video that I do on the main channel. It's going to go a lot more in depth on the Blazers situation, more in depth on Kevin Durant. This is just one guy's article for NBA.com, and I thought it was interesting because this is straight from 2007, and this is before we know that Greg Oden's knees are made of toast, and before we know that KD goes on to quite possibly become the best offensive player ever. Yeah, man, these takes from the days when things were actually happening. Let me know if you want to see more because I can go pull some receipts from what people were saying from basically any event in NBA history, and it'd be very fun to get an in the moment look at what people thought back then. 2K, I don't know if you're out there listening, but if you are, please take some of the elements from your old games and put them into new ones. I know you guys don't show any love to Blacktop anymore because apparently nobody plays it. You've went as far as to not even give them jerseys. They're wearing stupid shirts now, but look how cool this is. Look at this. We've got the bystanders here. We've got different stores. What kind of stores do they have here? This is a San Francisco court. Got cars in the background. Got a nice pizza shop up there, and that looks, I don't think I panned right. That looks like an NBA 2K store up there. Looks like I didn't pan the camera right. Got a souvenir shop down there, Seaside Souvenirs. This is a cool environment. Like, they should have more stuff like this in 2K. I guess they don't invest in the Blacktop anymore, but it'd be really cool if they did. Look at that. They got a T-Mobile store down here. I love how the T-Mobile sign is just like in HD. That must have been a sponsor back then. Everything else is kind of like pixelated. Got another fresh fish shop and oh, what's going on here? Whoa, 2K, what? Oh, okay. All right then. All right, they're just talking. All right, once you actually speed it up and play it. Wow, I thought I caught 2K slipping. Man, venturing back to these old games is funny. I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut it here before we get some get some content that gets me kicked off YouTube.